What's the difference between a home movie and a cinematic movie? A lot of times we hear filmmakers say it's the story that counts, but what do they really mean by that? If your videos aren't really getting the attention that you want, stick around because I'm going to give you some simple ideas that anyone can implement.
And it doesn't matter whether you have a smartphone, a DJI Gimbal, a pocket camera, an action camera, or a Zhiyun gimbal, or any other camera, because in this video, I'm going to give you some storytelling techniques to turn your home movies from random clips of your vacation or cycling trip or whatever into cinematic movies.
So I want to show you this home movie that my granddad shot many decades ago
using an 8mm cine camera. It's me and my brother playing beach cricket on the Norfolk coast in England. He was a farmer all his life. He's not around any longer, but I reckon he was probably the first filmmaker in my family. My granddad loved photography and shooting home movies, but if he wanted to shoot something, he had to carry around an 8mm camera and make sure it had some film loaded as well. And now we all have smartphones and maybe a bunch of clips similar to my granddad's home movies.
And we just need the knowledge to turn them into something more pro.
You can see my granddad is holding the camera in his hands because the shot is wobbling around a bit. At least he's not moving, so it's not unwatchable. Of course, then there was no such thing as the stabilization that we now have in our smartphones. And the reason this shot would probably be better if it wasn't so wobbly is to do with the story we want to tell. Remember that every shot creates some kind of feeling within the viewer. How does a wobbly shot make people feel? Probably unsettled and uncomfortable. I even have a friend who once walked out of a movie because there was too much crazy camera movement and it made him feel ill. If people feel comfortable, they're more likely to watch your video for longer, but there are times we might want our audience to feel uneasy. In a recent video, I showed you how to shoot this crane shot from the James Bond movie Skyfall. The shot is very smooth and stable, which suits the mood of this moment in the movie. But what if Bond is in a fight with some bad guys? Then we might want our viewers to feel what Bond is feeling. And so to tell that part of the story more effectively, we could use a shaky camera combined with faster paced editing. So while there are times when a shaky handheld camera helps, is it appropriate for this scene of me and my brother playing happily at the beach? Not if we want to evoke the feeling of a nice, relaxing holiday. But we could actually shoot this differently. What if we want to make this scene feel more exciting? What if we want to evoke a more energized feeling? Then I'd suggest that we film a series of close-ups combined with fast-paced editing. In which case, wobbly handheld shots would now be appropriate if we wanted to go for that look. What I want to stress here is that there is no wrong or right type of shot. You should always be thinking about what is right for your story and how you want your viewers to feel.
And that's essentially the difference between someone shooting a home movie or a filmmaker shooting a cinematic movie.
Someone who's just shooting their home movie probably sees something happening and just wants to capture it as a memory. But a pro thinks about how they want the audience to feel at every moment in the video, and then uses set techniques, or even invents their own techniques to make that happen. My granddad's home movie is like most home movies. The shots are pretty random. First, it's totally unedited. One shot or subject jumps to the next subject, depending on what took my granddad's interest at that moment. We might get a couple of shots of me and my brother playing and then 10 seconds of a windmill with no real connection between them. Of course, my granddad was only really interested in capturing family history for future generations. And it's so wonderful to have these little glimpses. And this is certainly not a criticism of my granddad's movie, but it's really just to point out what we need to do to make our movies more professional.
So what our movies need is what I call
a direction of travel. Let's imagine our movie is a route on Google Maps. Normally, if we input a destination, Google will work out the most direct route from where we are to where we want to go. But a home movie is more like a route which goes left, right, backwards a bit, north a bit, south again, and all over the place. Now imagine if Google gave us those kind of directions. Would we follow them? No, of course we wouldn't. We would find another program to show us a direct route. And that's exactly what happens to our audience if our movie doesn't have a clear direction. Our viewers are going to think, this movie isn't taking me anywhere, and then they'll just switch over to another movie which looks like it does actually take the viewer somewhere.
To make our home movies more professional, we need to create a sense that we're going somewhere. So let's talk about how to create a sense of direction in our movies. What about this video, the one that you're watching right now? So what did I do at the beginning? The first thing I did was to tell you where I was going in this video, because I told you that I'm going to show you in this video how to turn your home movies into pro videos. So straight away you could decide if you want to go on this journey with me. And if you're still watching, then obviously you said yes to that first decision that every viewer has to make. And the same goes for your movies. If you aren't clear at the start about where you're taking your viewers, you'll find that you get far fewer viewers choosing to come along. So the first thing that you really need to do is to decide where you're going to take your viewers.
If we think of the movie as a journey, then this is the destination of the journey. It's like the destination written on the front of a bus. It tells your audience whether this is the bus for them.
So let's think of an example. Let's say you're making a travel video about a trip to Switzerland.
It's very tempting to just film lots of shots of your visit and then edit them together randomly. But this type of video does not have a destination. Therefore, you aren't going to get too many people jumping on your movie bus. You'll get far more people jumping on board if you give them a destination.
And one of the best ways to create that destination is to ask a question. Something like,
is it worth visiting Zermatt?
So just think about it a minute. You see two videos with the titles,
My Trip to Switzerland and Is It Worth Visiting Zermatt? Which one would you choose to watch? My Trip to Switzerland is much more vague and it doesn't really give you any idea of a destination at the end. Is It Worth Visiting Zermatt promises the viewer that by the end of the video, that question is going to be answered. And that's not only going to get you more viewers at the start, but it's also much more likely to keep your viewers watching until you've given them that answer. So what's the difference between these two titles, apart from one having a clearer destination? Well, the second one implies a story, while the first one, it doesn't really.
And that's because, put simply, a story is actually a question.
For example, will Frodo defeat Sauron by throwing the One Ring into Mount Doom? Or will Luke Skywalker defeat the Empire by destroying the Death Star?
Those are the major questions which encompass the entire movie. But to create a story, that big question is then broken down into smaller questions.
For example, will Frodo agree to help Gandalf? Or will Luke Skywalker agree to go with Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Now, going back to my travel video example, is it worth visiting Zermatt? This can also be broken down into smaller questions.
How much does it cost to get to Zermatt? How much does it cost to stay in Zermatt? How nice is the town? What are the main pros and cons of the place? And so on. So by the way, Zermatt is a famous Swiss skiing town with amazing views of the Matterhorn. Apparently, the view of the mountain is so important to the economy that only electric vehicles are allowed there, as they don't want any smog spoiling things. And actually, that's the kind of little fact that you could put in there to keep your viewers more interested in your video.
Anyway, each of these smaller questions is what keeps your audience gripped to your video. The smaller questions are like chapters in your movie, and what these chapters do is give your video a structure. Now, the one thing that a home movie doesn't have is structure.
Without structure, our movie is going to appear like a kind of stream of consciousness. When the American novelist Jack Kerouac wrote On the Road, he famously wrote it on one long scroll of paper. And this is something like a stream of consciousness. And what that means is it's like writing down your thoughts as and when they come into your mind. And a home movie can seem a little bit like this as well. Or in fact, Kerouac took his scroll of paper and then worked on it, editing it and forming it into something more readable over many weeks. And by the way, that original scroll is now worth several $1 million. So you have a choice. You could film to a plan that you've already created, or you could film whatever you feel like filming and then structure it later. But I would say it's probably a good deal easier and quicker to set a plan before you start filming. So how do we create a structure in our movies? Well, one way to do this is by thinking of each section as a question. But what follows a question? Well, the answer is, and I'm about to reveal this to you, a reveal. You might have heard of shots being called reveal shots, but reveals are also key to storytelling. Because actually in its purest form, a reveal can be a secret that is deliberately hidden. You know, it was actually said that the creators of the TV show Lost would make sure that every single episode had a locked box of some form, and the characters in the story would spend some part of that episode trying to open the box and find out what was inside. And the reason for doing this is, of course, because people are by nature very curious. And if we see someone trying to find out what's in a box, we find ourselves wanting to know as well. On YouTube, this has even become a kind of whole genre in itself, known as unboxing videos. There was a time when an unboxing video could get tens of thousands of views with nothing more than someone opening a box to reveal what's inside. Now think of your video in the same way. Imagine it's a series of unboxing moments connected by a theme of the final unboxing, which is what I call the destination. Remember I talked about the Google Maps route earlier? Each point on this route takes us nearer the end destination. But this route can be broken down into mini journeys, each with its own smaller destination. On our visit to Zermatt, the first chapter could perhaps be the train ride to Visp. Next chapter could be from Visp, where you need to get a special train up into the mountains. What was the trip like? How much was a ticket? Are there any special discounts your viewers could take advantage of to make their trip cheaper? So each chapter shows a stage of your journey. On arriving in Zermatt, what is your first impression? What's the hotel like? Again, how much did it cost? Remember, the question is it worth visiting Zermatt? So how much it costs is really important information for this story. So why not include a running tally of all the costs at each stage? And this is another thing that will keep people watching as the cost keeps increasing. What will the final cost be? By showing the costs at each stage, you will also remind your audience why they're watching the video. As well, you show them that you haven't lost focus, and therefore they're less likely to lose focus themselves. Because if you keep your audience focused, they will be less likely to click away from your video. So each time you show the cost, this is one of those little mini story reveals. And all these mini reveals will eventually come together for the final big reveal at the end. And if you put each of these reveals about the same distance apart in your story, this creates a structure for your story. As well, don't forget to include anything funny or unusual that happened during each chapter. For a travel video, moments of spontaneity are really important. It's these moments which give your viewers a sense of experiencing the journey with you.
If we're going to plan our video about a trip to Zermatt before we leave, we can simply write out a series of headings and then keep a copy of this somewhere where it's easy to access.
So what I usually do is write things on a Google Doc which I can easily open on my phone. So when you're creating a story, try to think of ways to keep your viewers watching for a little bit longer. To make the stories in our videos stronger, we should try to make them as visual as possible. A story is a series of reveals, but let's try to make them visual reveals. Put simply, we need to show the box and we need to show the box being opened. Here's an idea for our Zermatt trip. We could use this Google map and show the progress as we travel along the route. So if you're good at animating, then you could use that skill here. If not, you could just print out the map and draw on it.
Another visual thing that we can do is to tease our audience with things that are going to come later in the video.
For this example, at the start of the video, we could show glimpses of each part of our Zhiyun journey. Because basically this is how a movie trailer works, teasing us with visual snapshots. But we can also use this in other types of video, reviews, travel videos, real estate videos, wedding videos, or anything. Again, it's like we show the box and we tease the viewers with what's inside. But if they really want to find out, they're going to have to keep watching. In one of my recent videos, I asked the question, are your shots cinematic? And in that video, I talked about one shot from a movie, which is actually 2 reveals.
If you haven't watched that video yet, I recommend that you watch it along with this one. So once we understand that a story is made up of a series of reveals, then we understand the real importance of the reveal shot when it comes to storytelling.
When you're filming your video, keep thinking about these reveal shots. Start with a question or a tease, and then answer the question with a movement of the camera, or even with a movement within a frame. So actually, if you want me to talk more about reveal shots in a future video, please let me know by giving this video a thumbs up.
You can actually see that I've been using all the techniques that I've been talking about in the making of this video. I've got one big question. What's the difference between a home movie and a cinematic movie? And to answer this question, I've created a series of smaller questions. And these smaller questions are what come together to create the overall structure of the movie. Which actually brings me to another really important part of story structure. Because it's a really good idea to make sure that each chapter doesn't go on too long. For example, if I find that one chapter looks much longer than the other chapters, I usually try to find a way to break it into 2 chapters. And if it can't be broken down into 2 chapters, then I'll try to find a way to cut it down and make it shorter. And this just means removing the less interesting stuff, or sometimes I'll find that stuff is really just repeating what's gone before. For example, there's 2 train journeys to get from my house to Zhiyun, and maybe I should just fit both of those journeys into 1 chapter. But it's probably not going to be too much difference between them. And it could get pretty repetitive, showing getting on and off trains and buying train tickets or whatever. And really the focus of this video is the town of Zhiyun, so the train journey is probably just going to be a small part of this story. So when you think about your chapters, think about how to make each chapter distinctive from the others. So let's look again at the Zhiyun video.
So chapter 1 can be giving people an overview of the journey about to come and getting ready to set out. Chapter 2 can be the train journeys. Chapter 3 can be first impressions of the town. Chapter 4 can be about the hotel where I'm staying. Chapter 5 could be about activities such as skiing or hiking in the mountains. And chapter 6 can be about maybe dining out in the town. So you can see that all the chapters are distinct from each other. And of course, it's essential that we move from one chapter to the next before our viewers start to get restless.
So if you want to learn more about smartphone filmmaking, you can join us on Patreon, where I have all kinds of downloads, ebooks, and there's a filmmaking podcast. And I've just recently added a Discord server for Patreon members. So you can now chat there and swap ideas with each other, and I'm usually there. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful, and I'll see you in the next video.